Hello, everyone. Welcome to another CampusTap webinar. Today we have a great webinar today, and we're going to be worked here today by the California State University Fullerton. We have Stephanie Reyes, Marcella, and Marissa Perez here to talk to us about their career specialist career engagement. To give them a chance to say hello to me before we jump into it.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Reyes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Marcela Rojas.
Good morning. I'm Marissa Perez. Good morning.
Great. Well, now we're kind of ready to jump into things. So today we're going to really be talking about the initiative there put in place to increase employer engagement and employer relations by over 220% in 1 year. So we're really excited to share that with you all today. We will get right into that. One second. All right, so as I mentioned, we are talking about the career specialist employer engagement initiative. I'd love to do an intro with our today. So first up is Marcella. Marcella received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of California, Riverside, and her Master of Arts in Education with a concentration in higher education from California State University Fullerton. She's had the opportunity to work in private and public institutions, such as Pomona College, where she served as the internship coordinator. In her current role as the career specialist for the College of Engineering and Computer Science at Cal State Fullerton, Marcella advises students on career options with major, provides job and internship search assistance while engaging with employers such as NASA, JPL, Raytheon, Boeing, Google, and many more. We also have Marissa Perez, who is also a career specialist at Cal State Fullerton. Marissa earned her Master of Arts in Counseling from California State University Fullerton and a Bachelor of Arts as a double major in Psychology and Spanish from Paramount University. She currently serves as a career specialist for the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Cal State Fullerton. In this role, Marissa advises students on career options with a major, provides job and internship search assistance, and guides students through the graduate school application process. Her role also includes engaging with employers to increase connections with students. In her prior career in higher education, coordinating family programs, student leadership and development, large-scale event planning, and assisting students through a first-year experience program. And we also have with us today Stephanie Reyes, who is the Interim Associate Director of Employer Relations. Stephanie received her Master of Arts in College Counseling and Student Services from the University of Laverne in 2010, and of Arts and Psychology from the California State University Fullerton in 2004. She currently serves the employer relations team. Main responsibilities include supervision of employer relations staff members, building relationships with local, regional, and national employers, and partnerships with key campus partners. She's also responsible for creating employer relations accountability and creating goals for 8 college career specialists. This led to the creation of a college career specialist employer engagement initiative, which we will be discussing today. And is currently in its 3rd year of implementation. Stephanie also served on the board of directors in 2017 Conference Planning Committee for MPIC, which just wrapped up in Seattle. In addition to presenting at the annual conference in 2016, she has also presented for NACE at the 2016 annual conference and is scheduled to present at the 2018 webinar focusing on employer relations. So again, a quick introduction. So now without further ado, we can kind of jump into things and begin with discussing a brief overview of the College Career Specialist Employer Engagement Initiative.
Are you ready?
Yeah, we are ready for you guys to go ahead and jump right into that.
All right. Thank you so much, Ethan, for the great introductions. Just to give you all a little perspective of our Career Center, I kind of want to give a brief overview of our structure. And so basically, as you know, it's been mentioned, we have 8 college career specialists. So we actually have an industry college career specialist model versus the generalist model. And then I also lead, as it was mentioned earlier, a team of the employer relations team, which consists of our events and social media coordinator specialists, our events and our marketing and communication specialist, our employer relations specialist, and our on-campus recruiting coordinator. In addition to that, we have 7 graduate interns, we have student assistants, we have 2 career development specialists, and we have our director and our associate director that leads us as well. So that's kind of just to give you an idea of our office structure. And basically the College Career Specialist Employer Engagement Initiative started off with each of the college career specialists having a target list of 20 employers. So we'll explain a little bit later about how they come up with that list of those 20 employers. But basically I created some metrics to measure how they are doing their employer engagement in terms of outreach with those 20 employers. And so these 8 levels of engagement, as you can see, consist of career fairs, on-campus recruiting, workshops, information sessions, or office hours, college engagement, job and internship postings, resume critiques, or if they participate in our career fairs as a sponsor or as a career center sponsor. So that's kind of the general overview, a real brief overview, because we're going to get into the details in a second. But that's just the overview.
Yeah, so before launching the program in 2015, what back led to the CSUF Career Center under Campus?
Yeah, so we can go on to the next slide, Ethan. Thank you. Yeah, so it's really how this all came about. I started with this career center at Cal State Fullerton about 2.5 years ago, and I was given the task of putting accountability to our career specialist in regards to their 40% of employer relations responsibilities that's in their job description. And so with that, it was also a university and a student affairs strategic goal to increase the number of paid internships and full-time opportunities for our students. And so we're doing that all of the time, but it really became a focus for us when I came on board. And so in order to help tell our story about how we were going to make this happen, you know, I worked with the director in terms of how can we, you know, create accountability, but also create some metrics to show how we are going about getting these internships and opportunities for our students. So that's kind of how, you know, it came about. I think that was all of the piece for that question, right? I can get into some of the challenges.
Yeah, I think before we jump into that, really, you know, who was involved in all the development? How did you execute the initiative? You know, and how did you go about determining that 40% of the employer outreach responsibilities was built into career services? You know, going into your employer target list and building those levels.
Sure. So our previous director, who is now in Jim Case, who is now in retirement land, he pretty much is the one who implemented the 40% employer relations responsibilities into the college career specialist job descriptions. I don't have the background on that, unfortunately, in terms of why. When I came on board, it was just, hey, you know, this has been in their job descriptions, but we didn't have someone in your position to really hold them accountable and to put some kind of strategy together. So that's kind of how, you know, we kind of got started. And so basically, I proposed a plan to our director. He said, okay, let's go with it. And then I, you know, basically had a meeting with all of the college career specialists and said, this is how we're going to, you know, work towards your employer relations account responsibilities. And so it's going to consist of a list of 20 target employers. Now, some of the career specialists have more than 20 employers. That's totally up to them. The minimum is 20. There was a little hesitancy on, or I think it was a little intimidating to have a list of 20 employers, because what I haven't gotten into is these are college career specialists, meaning they're not only doing employer work. As you can see, on the pie chart up there, they have a lot of other responsibilities that they're required to do in addition to employer relations, and that includes counseling, right? Not only that, each of our college career specialists are a member of their college's student success teams. That's what we've implemented here at Cal State Fullerton. And so all that to say, they have a lot going on in their daily roles. So I really had to be cautious of how I went about implementing this for them and making them feel comfortable with the fact that they now need to include this new employer relations work that they didn't do prior to me being on board. It was always required of them, but there wasn't, like I said, that accountability. So it was really, all staff, all team effort to get this launched. I had the support of my director. We didn't have an associate at the time. No, I'm sorry, we did. Our new director was the previous associate. So had a lot of leadership support in, bringing on this new change to our office, but it was a little bit challenging at first.
And now, I'd love to really do your perspective and individual involvement in carrying out some of those things, including how you go about reaching out to employers, what messaging, relationship building strategies you guys use, and how did the employer coverage responsibilities change their approaches to the role. And then what types of employer relationships did you prioritize, especially because you're all in different working for colleges?
Before I let you all speak to that, there's a slide on the training that we did. Ethan, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can put that up right here.
Put that up. So before I let Marcella and Marissa talk about how they, do all this work, before all of the specialists actually did all this work, I had a lot of the specialists come up to me and say, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know really kind of what the employer relations team is doing right now, because there wasn't that communication, because it just wasn't happening. The employer relations work for them wasn't happening. So basically I figured out, okay, I need to start from basics and do some training for the college career specialists on employer relations outreach and how to go about doing that. So very basic, first, this is what the employer relations team does in terms of the services we offer to employers, so that way the specialists could be well versed as they were talking to their employer targets. We did, invite our Center for Internships and Community Engagement in, because they handle all of our academic internships on campus. So they also shared how they go about their process, how we define a good relationship and a bad relationship with a target employer, because those employers are ever evolving. Just because they start off with certain employers on their list doesn't mean that they have to stick with them if an employer is not engaging with them. So just wanted to mention that we did have a lot of training that happened before any of the work actually started. So I'll go ahead and let you.
So I'll kind of just add a little bit to the challenge part. I know Stephanie pretty much explained a little bit of the challenges that the career specialist encountered, but I think as a career specialist, and Marissa can speak about her perspective too, I think the challenging part was when we don't come with this sales mentality, or we don't have a sales experience. So I think that was a very difficult part for us to understand. How do we do our job, because we're here to be counselors, but also we're not salespeople, so how do we combine both or do both? So I think the mindset really had to change for us to be open to it and kind of find our own unique way to engage with our employers, or our employers on our target list. And I think another challenging part that I think most specialists would encounter as well was just the expectations. I think for my college, as the College of Engineering and Computer Science, I had the expectation or the pressure of like, well, your top 20 should have Facebook, Google, Microsoft, like those top-notch tech companies. So kind of being able to navigate those expectations and be realistic with who my employers would be on the list too. Did you want to?
Just to add to what Marcella said, in terms of just changing the mindset was, because we are all career counselors, our main focus has really been working with students. And so changing the mindset was also in seeing, how can we be doing our 40% employer relations but still be connecting with students, right? So there's obviously an overlap there, because when we bring employers on campus, we're bringing them to engage with students, or they're coming to recruiting events, or they're doing information sessions. So it's just also about seeing where they're overlapping, and where, although we're spending time, a significant amount of time with employers, it's for the benefit of students, and it's for students to come and engage with those employers. And for me, since it was very goal-driven, the initiative, one of the challenges I think that we found was that we needed to be very specific with the accountability and the metrics, so that we would know exactly how are we achieving this initiative, within our college, and what would that look like if we met the goals. So just having a lot of specific metrics was really important, and that has been evolving, even since that first year. But for some of us, at least for myself, that was something that I really needed from the very beginning.
I think we're going to go into how did we develop our target list. Is that what you wanted next?
Yeah. We'll learn a little bit more about specific to your different directions, working with college and interact students, how you were going about building those targets and actually connecting with employers.
For me, creating the target list, so I tapped into a few people and offices within my college. I first met with our dean, our associate dean, and also emailed a few faculty as to do they have any specific companies in mind that they would want me to add to the target list. With that being said, I felt like that would be a good approach, just because, again, if they had a contact within Google or a contact with Microsoft, it would be a little bit easier for me to get into those companies, or try to develop a stronger relationship with the companies or the alumni that work there. We also I worked directly with our director of development, and they focus on bringing in funding and money for our college for projects, for research, and so forth. So I partnered up with them to see, okay, if you're focusing on certain companies, is there a way that I can collaborate with you and also promote our career center services with them? So that's kind of how I took the approach of like what companies I would start off with for the first year. And then I also used, like everybody else, LinkedIn to kind of see where our alumni are at. And then see if there's a way to establish a relationship with the alumni, and then start going from there too.
For my college, it was a little bit of a different experience. So within the College of Humanities and Social Sciences, there's over 20 different majors. There's over 7,500 students in the college. So none of the majors are profession specific, in the sense that they don't lead to one specific career path. So the students in my college are interested in a lot of different areas, education, nonprofit, the private sector, government work. So it's really all across the board. So that was a challenge in figuring out, well, how do I narrow down the types of employers that I'm going to engage with? So I really basically just started with, anecdotally, what are the areas that students are often talking to me about that they're interested in, that they share with me through our student appointments. So I actually didn't go about the route of really relying on faculty connections, because in my college mostly looks to me for employer connections versus the other way around. So I basically started with what are students interested in, utilize LinkedIn, alumni, looking for alumni. We do a lot of collaboration as well with our Office of Alumni Relations. So when we have different panels on campus related to careers, they have been a really good resource for us as well, in terms of letting us know who they're connected to and what alum wants to get connected back to campus. So that's another resource that we've utilized. So that was really my process in the first year. It evolved a little bit going into the second year, because then I already had some really good established relationships with employers, and I was able to ask them for referrals of colleagues that they had in their field that I didn't yet know. So for example, I work with the FBI and the CIA pretty frequently, and them being part of the intelligence community, I ask them, are there any other colleagues that you have at other intelligence agencies that you could connect me to? And they were actually really helpful in doing that, and that led to further connections with, for example, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. So that's another way that I've been able to expand the employers that I'm getting connected to.
I also want to add to another way that I moved forward the second year was being able to work really strongly with our clubs. So the engineering computer science clubs such as Society for Hispanic Engineers, Society of Women Engineers. I usually I typically do a lot of workshops for them, a lot of presentations, but I noticed that a lot of companies and professionals would email them directly or invite them to events or invite them for site visits and so forth. So I just thought, what a good way to tap into their resources as well and utilize their connections to then evolve some of the relationships for certain companies too.
Excellent. Now, before moving forward, I wanted to remind all of our students sound working a bit better. All right, I got the problem coming from our end, and you're able to hear us as well, but the focus is really on Cal State and everyone's having that, so talking as possible. But remind everyone that feel free to pose questions throughout. We will leave some time at the end, but we also address them live on this. So thank you so much for everything about so far from Stephanie, and now we got to jump into moving from 2015-2016 academic year into 2016-2017. How you really analyze those from year one, maybe highlight some of those great results first of all, and then how you adjusted that ahead of fall 2016.
Sure. So something I didn't mention initially, I forgot to mention, was that in addition to the 8 levels of engagement that we started off with, that the specialists used to determine whether a relationship is moving in the right direction or, moving anywhere, for that matter. And so let's say, they posted a job, they have a job posting in Simplicity that already happened before they started doing this work. Well, that's one level of engagement. So now the goal is to get them to another level of engagement, which could be a career fair, which could be a workshop, which could be our, any of the activities that we do within the Career Center. So that's kind of, I wanted to give a little bit more background on those levels because there's also a template, if you can put that up, Ethan, that slide, that they work off of that includes their list of employers and the levels that they're at as we go through, a given year. In addition to whether they were an existing or a new employer. So another piece I forgot to mention was that in addition to having these lists of 20 employers, I also gave them the goal of having at least, I want to say in the first year, it was 5 to 10 of those employers on their list had to be new employers. So new meaning they've never engaged on campus at all with the Career Center, with anyone on campus. And then the other 5 to 10 of those employers could be or had to be existing. So those were employers that, maybe came to a career fair, like I mentioned, and that's the only thing they did with us. Maybe they only had a job posting. So getting those employers to additional levels. So that's kind of how that list is also put together. And at the end of each year, I'm having them submit the template that you're seeing up on the screen to show me where they took each of their employers, whether they were new or existing, and then I tabulate all of those results into, I think, let's see what slide that is. There might be a slide, might be the last slide, but well, I think we're gonna get to that unless you want to, there we go. I'm sorry, the one before that, there you go. Right before. Oh, the chart, sorry.
That's after.
After that one, I think maybe.
And then
one more. Yeah. Okay, sorry. There it is. So all of these numbers come from basically that template that you just saw from each. So each of the college career specialists submits that to me. I like to capture the numbers by college because that also tells a story as well. And so, you know, as Marissa and Marcella mentioned, they both have their different challenges as well as all the other specialists in terms of how employers that interact with their colleges recruit. And so that was a whole nother piece of it as well, because our director wanted to hold everyone accountable to the same internal goals. But I really had to explain that, you know, and this also needs to be explained to our stakeholders as well, that not all employers recruit in the same manner. Not all employers, not all industries come to career fairs. Not all of them post on our job board. They interact with us in different ways. And so that's where our college career specialists really did a great job in being creative, depending on what college they represent in terms of getting those employers and meeting those end goals. And so everyone, you know, met their goals. And in that first year, yeah, we had a 220% increase in employer relations because nothing was really happening before that. So there was that, you know, that pretty large number there. But we've continued to increase as we went along. As it was mentioned, you know, we're in our third year of implementation. But in addition, going back to the chart up there, I count employer engagement by the college, and then I also count unique employer engagement. And whether we're tracking whether or not they're interacting with students on campus and then also off campus as well. We're also taking into account that our college career specialists are sending numerous emails, making phone calls to make the engagement happen. And so I also wanted that to be a part of the story that we tell everyone, that these relationships don't happen overnight. We don't get Facebook on campus just by asking them to come. It takes a lot more work than that. So going back to the question, you know, basically, how did I analyze the results from year one and adjust to moving to the next year?
I just wanted to jump in with a question from
oh, sure.
Before jumping in, Elizabeth asked when you're talking about levels of engagement, taking into account interest in hiring and having employers who want to engage, but don't have strong interest in reciprocated.
I think he's, just to repeat your question, just to make sure we heard it correctly. So
with the 8 levels of engagement, how do you account students' interest in hiring out the first part?
So how do we take into account student interest in hiring outcomes?
I'm not sure, maybe they can elaborate a little bit more. I mean, those really don't correlate for us. The levels of engagement are just to help us to determine whether or not we're moving an employer, you know, to more engagement with us, and that means more engagement with our students, more internship opportunities for our students, more career opportunities for our students. We're not currently tracking whether those students are being hired from those employers. I mean, we do follow up with them, and Marcella and Marissa have some success stories from a couple of students that have reached out to them to say, hey, I got an internship, or hey, I was able to connect with this employer that I wasn't previously able to because they weren't coming to campus. So I don't know if that's kind of answering the question a little bit.
I think one thing we also would be when you were in the planning phase is if students past years and experience their role in how you planning, developing those levels.
Yeah, so taking into account student interest in our company.
So for my college, that's basically all I did. So I think I mentioned before that my college looks to me to bring the employer connections versus me being able to ask them, what connections do you have to people in the industry? So all I went off of was what students tell me that they're interested in. So, you know, I can't say that I did a survey or I did a focus group with them, but anecdotally, you know, from notes that we keep from student appointments, I was able to see what are the interest areas that they have. And that's how I came up with the organizations and the agencies and the employers on my list. So for me, it's very reflective of public service work, pretty much. A lot of nonprofits, a lot of government agencies, as well as, you know, a couple companies in the private sector as well that are very interested in HSS majors or open to all majors.
I think for me, obviously working with tech companies, I knew Google, Facebook, Microsoft were going to be companies that students were interested in, so I automatically put those on my list. Moving over to year 2, I started analyzing, okay, do I have a lot of tech companies and not enough civil engineering companies or mechanical engineering companies? So I started like just analyzing to have a good balance. In addition, meeting with student clubs and representatives from certain student clubs, I started to notice a little bit more of their interests and what I was missing. So such as like more civil engineering companies or like video game companies. So I took that into consideration my second year.
So the levels of engagement, I think I'm finally getting the question now. The students' interests in terms of if, like, let's say, so one of our levels is information sessions. What if students don't come to our information sessions? How are we going to then get an employer to, how are we going to track that relationship, I think is what the question was. But all of these levels of engagement that we've come up with are our highly utilized services, not only by students, but employers. So I don't know if that hopefully answers the question, sorry.
Well, we out there taking some more follow-up. We will definitely address that one way or another. Everyone's going to be answers what we're looking for. But now we answered your question.
Oh, okay.
We're there. So back to the original question. You know, love about the successes that came in the 2015-2016 year, and then how you got the results and improve to follow 20. And just on the slide to share.
We can go with the slide that has the logo. The slide with the logos on it?
Okay.
So as the slide's coming up, I'll just give some background about our campus. So, you know, Cal State Fullerton is in the heart of Southern California. We're in between Orange County, Los Angeles County, and not too far from the Inland Empire. And so we're kind of, you know, centrally located around all of the major, you know, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. However, because we weren't really doing a lot of employer engagement work prior to all of this, you know, we weren't really on the radar of a lot of our, you know, these big companies that are local to us, or even not local, some are in the Bay Area. But all that to say, when we first started off and Marcella was trying to reach out to the Facebooks, to the Googles, to the Microsofts, we were getting told that Cal State Fullerton isn't on our target list. Sorry, you know, so we had to really start fresh again and start to think, well, we still need to work towards getting these companies on campus. So let's be a little more strategic and creative about that. Sure, they're not ready to post with us or not ready to come to a career fair, but how about we get the alumni that are working there, because we definitely have alumni at a lot of these companies, to come back to campus and start off with that and just give our students here at Cal State Fullerton an opportunity to hear from an alumni who's working at Facebook. How did you even get your foot in the door? And so that's kind of some background on how we got to these companies initially. And now we're starting to see that companies are actually reaching out to us, these Fortune 500 companies. Marcella can share some
just
stories.
a little bit about that too. It's I really had to also analyze my college and what my college can offer to these companies, opposed to just, hey, can you come to campus? Can you recruit our students? So I really just took the initiative of also leading with the fact that Cal State Fullerton is a Hispanic serving institution. We have a lot of first-generation students. We have a growing number of women in the computer science and engineering college. So I kind of used that approach to also focus on Google and some of the other companies. So for example, that's how I ended up getting Google. Is they are currently in an initiative of working with certain institutions to bring in diversity into their company. So Cal State Fullerton, luckily, being able to approach them, we took that approach and they were willing to work with us on that after engaging some of the alumni first with Google. With Google, fortunately, we've been able to grow from the last 2-3 years. They have been coming to our campus, doing spring and summer programming. They have been bringing some engineers to do like a whole week programming with our students. And again, their focus is very much about serving all of our students, but primarily working with certain student clubs and organizations, and that's how we've been able to continue to develop a relationship with Google. Just another example with Facebook, again, it's really hard to get Facebook on campus or to even start a relationship with them. We ended up having a summer trip to the Bay Area, Stephanie and I, so we ended up meeting with Tesla, Facebook, and Google. With Facebook, again, we got the approach of like, Cal State Fullerton is not a target school for us. So from there, I just started to have a discussion, well, what else can we do? How can we prove to you that our students are really good? Is there anything that we can start off with? So they said, okay, great, let's start off with like a coding challenge, where they would just send a coding challenge to our students. They would take it, and based on that, depending on the level of how our students would perform, they would be willing to even consider posting positions on our system or inviting our students to certain events. And luckily, again, it's really being able to understand your students and kind of showcase to these companies that they're well prepared. Luckily, with that challenge, some of our students got interviews with Facebook, and we've been able to get invited to private events that Facebook has been having in Southern California. So.
From my perspective, I haven't had that same experience working with the types of organizations that I work with in terms of them having target lists and Fullerton not being a part of that, largely in part because a lot of them are government agencies that I'm trying to target. So mostly my challenge has been finding an individual to, specific individual to connect with within these large federal agencies, who oftentimes, they might have regionally based recruiters, but a lot of times the recruiters are out in the DC area. And so, taking into account limited resources and limited time and funding, a lot of times it can be difficult to connect with those individuals and actually create an opportunity for them to engage with students. But with my students being very interested in things like law enforcement and government in general, one of the programs that we put together, Marcella, myself, and another specialist at the time coordinated a Breaking Into Government Week. So the whole week was focused for students that were interested in careers in government. And we had a mixture of presentations, information sessions, employer panels to bring students to engage with different employers. So some of those topics were finding careers in state government, writing a federal resume. There was an FBI panel. The CIA did a couple of information sessions and office hours. We collected surveys at the end of every session during that week, also asking students what other federal or what other government agencies or organizations would you like to see in the future? And so we used the feedback that we got from that year to influence what we did for the following year for Breaking Into Government. And so that led to an expansion of law enforcement agencies. So we did a careers in law enforcement roundtable, got some local probation departments, some sheriff's departments to come on campus to participate in that. And that was also where I was able to utilize my current contacts within some of those agencies and get connected to new agencies. So that led me to the example that I provided before, where we were able to connect with someone from the Drug Enforcement Administration, as well as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, within there specifically the Office of Investigations. And so the feedback that we were getting from students has definitely been an influence in terms of what we do for the next year, or in regards to programming and how we specifically alter our target list for that next year using student feedback and their testimonials.
I also wanted to add just a couple of things too. For example, I've been working with a faculty member who runs the Women in Computing and Engineering program. So I think understanding certain industries is very important, because for the STEM field, to increase female in the STEM field is very important right now. So that was a way to leverage some of the relationships with companies, and how do we start developing a relationship with them, whether it be a site visit or just a speaker to come on campus, focusing on just the female piece of it. was one approach. And then I think maybe Marissa can also speak on this if that has been her experience. But I think with this whole initiative of employer engagement, it has really opened up just not relationship with companies, but also with faculty and staff and offices within our own institutions that I think we wouldn't have been able to develop if it wasn't for this. So we talked about like the alumni office, the director of development and partnership with my college, but just other staff and faculty that I think sometimes breaking into faculty and working with faculty has always been an issue, and it always seems to be brought up within career services. I think this has been able to open up that window or that door to start having a conversation about companies, employers, how to engage them, and I think faculty have been very open to that, at least in my college, and I know from other specialists, they've been able to develop stronger relationships within their institute, within their college faculty and staff too. So.
Yeah, because to expand on that, one specific example would be that with the increased employer engagement that we were doing and bringing more government agencies on campus, that led specifically the criminal justice faculty that I work with to want to collaborate with the Career Center on a new career fair, specifically for law enforcement and government agencies. And so the Career Center took it on, and we had our first public service, government, and nonprofit expo this first fall semester of the year. But the way in which we were able to collaborate with the faculty was that they had been mentioning that they receive a lot of emails and requests from agencies that reach out specifically to faculty wanting to come into the classroom or wanting to get engaged in the classroom setting. And a lot of times faculty aren't able to meet those requests because they have a full syllabus pretty much, right? And they have the limited time in the classroom. So the criminal justice faculty and the department chairs were wanting to be able to, meet those employers' requests in some way, but not necessarily in the way that they were asking in the classroom. And so the career expo that we were able to coordinate and facilitate helped to bridge those connections between all of us, between career services, between faculty, and between employers.
And I've also been noticing now with certain faculty members, they understand what our office does, or are a little bit more open to learning more about our office. And I'm getting a lot more correspondence from them as to, hey, I met this company at a conference that I was at, can you please follow up? Or they keep me in the loop sometimes, they CC me on things. So it's kind of nice to at least start that relationship with faculty members too, and hopefully that leads to other initiatives or just being able to strengthen our top 10, 20 employer engagement for the next few years too.
Excellent. Q&A, but want to cover everything we're looking to discuss today before we jump into that. Some more campus partners across also some alumni relations. Foreshadow, you're going to speak about some specific student testimony. Want to see if had a provide how much the program has benefited.
Oh yes. So there is a slide. I think that is, what slide is that?
It's the one before the one that we were just showing right now.
Sorry. So we conduct an annual student comprehensive survey, and basically trying to find out what students are thinking about our services. I believe it's slide 14.
Sorry, slide 14. Yeah, it's the final one.
Next one? 14. I think slide 14. There we go. So, we asked them questions about our, how their experiences with our counseling services, with, basically all of our services that we offer at the Career Center, which ones they're highly utilizing. And then also we asked for, what can we improve on? What do you want to see more from the Career Center on? And so we continue to get, them wanting, like somehow the slide adjusted, but those circles that you're seeing on the screen should be moved over to they're wanting more engagement with employers, more employer events. And so even though we keep bringing these employers on campus, they still want to see more employers. And so I recently did an internship panel, and I have invited some employers to speak about their internships, how the students in the audience could get an internship with them because they were hiring at that moment. And I also didn't mention that I also have a target list myself. My target list is 10 employers just because of all the other responsibilities and all the other employers that we still have to engage with. But I do have a list of 10 employers, and so on this particular panel, I got some of those employers involved. And just to your question about a testimonial, a student who was interested in one of the employers who actually didn't show up ended up getting an internship with one of the companies who did. And so again, that wouldn't happen if we weren't held, all of us in the Career Center, held accountable to be bringing more employers to meet with our students on campus.
Another example I would say, so in my area, it's difficult to track testimonials in regards to hiring because government agencies, their hiring process, I mean, could take anywhere from 6 months to a year plus if we're talking about background checks, you know, and all of those lengthy processes. But the LAPD has, as an example, Los Angeles Police Department has been on my target list for a couple of years now. And they do a lot of recruiting. They're very active on campus in terms of information sessions, as well as providing the writing test, which is the first part of the application process for applicants. And so I think this past fall, I was told from our main recruiter contact that 2 Fullerton students had made it into the police academy. And with the LAPD only having a 2% rate of applicants that actually make it into the academy, he said it was excellent that 2 students had made it that far from Fullerton, taking into account all of the recruiting that they do, you know, just in the community, at college campuses, and in other ways as well.
One last thing I want to add to is I mentioned that we started off with 8 levels of engagement, and now we're at 10 levels of engagement. And so what happened in between the first year and the second year is we implemented a job shadow program. And so a lot of the employers on the target list are the first, on the college career specialist target list, are the first to get those invites to be a part of this job shadow program. And another testimonial is we've had students who participated in the shadow program actually come out with an internship. One of them was hired as an intern, and another student was offered a full-time career opportunity. So again, we also added the job shadow program is the 9th level, and the company tours is the 10th level. So the specialists are actually coordinating site visits for students to go onto these employers' facilities and learn more about them. But you know, all of this work wouldn't be happening if they weren't being held accountable, if there weren't levels for them to try to strive towards and goals to meet at the end of the year.
Excellent. Just wanted to close out as an opportunity to wrap things up and give kind of a final advocacy for employing these types of initiative in Career Center. Kind of speaking probably how that's been for you, and you know, maybe some advice to look forward to another institution is looking to deploy this initiative for Career Center.
Sure. I will say that, you know, a lot of times when I watch presentations on, you know, best practices and thinking about whether I can implement that best practice at our campus, and we're not all the same size, shape, you know, we have private schools, we're a large state public institution with 40,000 students, as I mentioned. So all that to say, you can definitely adapt this method to work for your campus, to your Career Center structure, by just using the levels of engagement. I actually adapted that from UC Riverside, where I previously worked at, and they have that metric as well. So if you wanted to follow up with them to see how they're using it, you know, I would definitely recommend reaching out to the UC Riverside Career Center. But it's been kind of an evolving camp initiative in the way that we learn something every year in terms of, do we need to add more levels? Do we need to take away levels? Do we need to decrease the amount of employers on the target list? So far, we haven't. We've kept consistent with having 20 employers on the list every year, but that might change. So we're very open to not making this super difficult for our specialists on top of all of the other work that they have to do. It's really important for us to continue this because, as we saw from our student comprehensive survey, the students want more employers. So that tells us we need to continue doing the work that we're doing.
I think just for me, a few final things to cover. Again, as a specialist, it was challenging in the beginning, but I think overall, taking a step back, it's really about, like, again, going back to serving the students and what their needs are. So taking that into consideration, and also as we're, like Stephanie mentioned, we're a specialist model here. So being able to engage with companies and employers has really helped me to further learn about the industry, right? I think sometimes we don't have those opportunities to learn about the market, the industry, what they're looking for, hearing it firsthand from certain companies, and how do we better prepare our students. So this has really helped me getting that one-on-one with certain companies and recruiters and employers, and being able to then, whatever they give me as advice and tips, to really be able to structure programming and services for our students. So an example would be, like, I'm creating a coding boot camp. Again, because it goes back to what some of the employers have mentioned and what they're looking for in our students, and how do I best prepare our students for these companies. And I think it's also about working smart, right? Because going back to the fact that we all have so many things on our plate and there's so many things that we need to do and not enough time, it's more about, like, instead of creating new programs, it's how do you then collaborate with things that are already going on within your college. So how do you collaborate with clubs that are already developing workshops and events and just plug in an employer to do that workshop, or being able to work with faculty on certain initiatives that they have, and how do you plug a certain alumni or an employer for those things. So I think it's also about going back and not doing double work, but it's more about being smart about how do you plug yourself in and some of the employers as to what's going on campus already.
Yeah, just to add to that piece that Marcella said, my advice would be just to see where there is overlap between partners that you can work with on campus, or also overlap in terms of goals that different constituents have. So, for example, I work very closely with the psychology and sociology faculty in my college, and they had wanted to, have me come into the classroom and do a presentation on career options for their 300 level students. And so, knowing that I wanted to engage employers, I, proposed, why don't we do something a little bit more creative, and I can put together a panel for you on, this one specifically was careers in the helping profession outside of counseling and social work. And so they were very happy with that, and collaborating with them. We actually utilized their class time. So I coordinated the panel, so it was on a day and a time that the students would be in class, but I already had the faculty on board with the idea. So they just brought their entire classrooms to the location that we were having the employer panel. So that was just a good example of, often we have the same goals and we just go about it different ways, but that's not necessarily working smart. So just seeing, okay, how can we work together to be the most efficient and accomplish the one goal?
Great. Well, it looks like we are all quiet on the question front. So I think that's a great place to keep things up. Great way to wrap that up, everybody. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today. Everyone who's viewing this, when everybody can sign up. In our in advance, we will be sending out a edited version of the webinar along with the accompanying slides. And we will check in with Stephanie, Marcella, and Marissa about how to best build up your contact information and then we'll get in touch with them to learn more about this initiative and speak more about how you may want important participate in your institution as well. So thank you all again for joining us again. We'll be sending a follow-up within the week, so keep an eye out for that. And we should have another in January, so keep another eye out for that. But thank you all again for joining us today, and thank you again to our awesome guests. We appreciate your time, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.